are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar brought to you by Teksoft Ventures, the education specialist. We're going to be talking today about innovative methods to generate budget and support for training initiatives. This is actually part 3 of a series, but if you didn't see the other 2, not to worry. We're going to be presenting a lot of information for you today. Jan and Konn will be speaking. Before we get started with the web seminar, I want to take just a moment to talk about the technology that we're using. So you should see on the right-hand side of your screen a control panel or a chat panel. You can use that chat panel to submit a question to us at any time during today's webinar. Just type your question into the box and click send, and we will answer as many of those questions as we have time for at the end of the session. You can also slide the panel open and closed by clicking on the arrow in the upper left corner. Just don't click the black X or it will knock you out of the web seminar. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Jan Konn. Jan is the president of Teksoft Ventures. She's responsible for the overall direction of the organization. She works very closely with clients to develop strategic education programs that can provide value to the enterprise. Jan's got over 22 years of experience working with ERP systems, 17 years experience in the adult learning arena. She's led numerous ERP education projects, including global SAP rollouts for Fortune 500 companies, public sector organizations, and mid-market companies. And Jan also enjoys the sport of pickleball, a great sport with a stupid name, and enjoys traveling throughout the country, participating in competitive tournaments. And Jan, with that, I'd like to turn the floor over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mike. I really appreciate it. Thanks for joining me, folks. And what we want to do with this last session is kind of wrap up how you can obtain budgeted monies. As we all know, various areas in the organization are striving to get some budgeted monies for their initiatives, and why isn't sustainment important? And we all know it's important because it helps to protect and really foster your investment as it relates to your ERP or SAP type of systems. So we're going to look at some of the best business practices. We've looked at learning assets in the prior seminars, and how the organization of this knowledge and this knowledge management is so important, because when you look at the digital universe explosion, we're looking at 44 times the information in 2020 than what we had in 2009. And if users can't access what they need in order to do their jobs and perform them with a high efficiency rate, they're going to stop looking, they're not going to be well informed, and their education and their learning will actually dissipate over time, over years. We're also going to look at a couple of learning management systems, and we talked before about resources. And we're going to talk about what resources are needed as far as internal or versus external resources. Some best-in-class learning organizations. What the best learning organizations, according to ASTD, what are their attributes? And that, again, is some information that you can bring into your management to try to get some of these budgeted dollars. We also have some more measurable research information, and we're going to look at completing the business case and looking at an ROI example. Again, just an example, but something to start getting some of these key assumptions and really make it meaningful in what the ROI is, what your costs are, what your benefit is, and what the savings are of these initiatives or this program. So when we recap a little bit with parts 1 and 2, we looked at an organizational change program. Have to get buy-in. Your goals of this program must be aligned with the corporate or the enterprise-wide goals, and that must be clearly stated when you're rolling this out from an OCM perspective. Look at key stakeholders. Look at having them help you get the messaging out through the organization as well. Current state, where are we at today? Where do we want to be? What's our program build strategy going to be? What's our governance model? And what's our framework? Best business practice alignment. Boy, we've heard them all at various user group meetings, ASTD. What do we need to do to protect our learning assets? Make sure they're an asset, not an expense. Make sure it's repeatable. How do we do that? We talked a lot about that in the last couple sessions. And then the people and the technology piece. Technology has become kind of a wrapper around everything. Most everything we do has a technology element to it. And the people element is ever so important as well, like super user programs and how do you roll out kind of a small initiative, make sure that you get that quick win. Those early wins can really help to accelerate your initiative if you run a couple of sample pilot programs. Small user base or something that can really alleviate pain for one of your businesses. We also have some supporting research metrics, and from those metrics, we take our assumptions and we develop the business case. So that's where we're going to end up today, is really looking at completing that ROI. Okay, there's a slide that folks have seen, and it's done by IDC, which is a well-respected research organization. And this just talks about the fact that if you don't reinvest in your folks, that with their job and their competency levels go down to a substandard level after year 3, because remember, there's a lot of variables here. First of all, you've got changes in folks. So if they weren't there for the initial go live of your ERP system, and they came in after and they were taught by Sue or John, and Sue or John didn't have updated curriculum, and you don't have accessibility to learning assets, etc., the processes also might change. So you've the variables of different people, different processes, upgrades. How many times I've been involved in SAP upgrades and they say, oh, it's technical only. And what does that really mean? And they say it's technical, but they're still there's still different processes and different programs or transaction codes that are being used, and folks need to be trained on that. So as all these process improvements and process changes go on and no training, by the time you get to year 3 with no reinvestment of your folks, they are operating at a substandard level. And when we're dealing with ERP software, which is truly mission-critical software, how can an organization possibly meet their enterprise-wide goals if the folks using their mission-critical software are at a substandard level? All right, as part of this, when you look at sustainment and repeatability, we look at different learning vehicles. Years ago, 20 years ago, whenever somebody needed to learn something, they went to a formal classroom. And as a matter of fact, we did some work for a higher education university, and that's exactly their thought process before SAP was, every time we want someone to learn something, we send them to a formal classroom. And we all know there's a lot of different ways to learn brought to you by various technologies. When you look at some of the vehicles, we all know what instructor-led is. You want instructor-led for long and complex subjects, like when a customer service person that might go to a 3-day class in a new ERP rollout. That should be instructor-led. There's typically critical mass. The instructor can see who is and isn't getting it and can react to that. The disadvantage is it's not very repeatable, and it certainly can be costly. And when you look at in a post-go-live environment, it's very rare that you're going to bring on 20 people that are going to requisition goods at the same time to send them to a formal instructor-led class. So you kind of deal with economies of scales there, and it doesn't really work in your favor. So the good news is the instructor can gauge how much learning is taking place, and the issue from a sustainability perspective, it's not very repeatable. So now we go into something that is a bit more repeatable, and that's distance learning. Distance learning is conducted in many cases to reinforce learning or to build on from a base or a foundation. So you might have a customer service person that goes to their initial 3-day class that teaches them how to do their new job. But when it comes to maybe reporting, you may have that in a distance learning class, synchronous, meaning the instructor is teaching it to various locations, and that might be a 2 to a 3-hour class. It can be repeatable if you record it with tools like Adobe Connect, and it's really best used to get users away from their desks and still get them in another room. There was a situation, we had about 50 folks on an AP analysis class, so AP accounts payable reporting class. We had 6 locations. Each one of those locations had 7 or 8 people in their respective room. So what it does is it makes sure that there isn't that job interrupt, because I know even though folks may put signs at their desk saying, do not interrupt, people will still do that. So works out really, really well to kind of get them a bit sequestered in a room so, again, they can have 100% of their attention to the instructor in a distance learning environment. Desk side coaching, recommendation is don't put together all these robust materials when there's 1 or 2 folks that are possibly doing a particular job role. So there's asset managers, there's accounts payable folks that cut checks, and there might be 1 or 2 people. You still want to do and create transaction-based documentation, either using a UPerform or a tool like that, InfoPack, you know, those various tools that create the documentation, or even just a Word document. So the recommendation is you still definitely want to go ahead and create transaction-based documentation, but you can forego PowerPoint slides, exercises, etc., and just kind of do more of a collaborative type of a teaching, one-on-one, or maybe 2 folks and 1 instructor. Okay, something that's been very, very effective is the day in the life. And day in the life can be used with role-based training. And day in the life is more of a process approach that will bring in 3 to 6 roles that are integral to that process from a user perspective, so they can complete that process from soup to nuts. So what it really does is it helps users understand the upstream and the downstream, and it drives home the concept of how their role fits into this, and how if they don't do their jobs correctly, how this process can be broken, or the chain is broken very quickly. So it really, if you look at Kirkpatrick's model in level 3 out of the 4 models, it really drives home, how do I apply what I'm learning here? You know, it's one thing to sit folks in class and have them punch keys, and unfortunately, if you don't really kind of relate it to how they do their job roles, they're learning by rote. But this whole day in the life has a tendency to put them at their desk, and they understand the whys behind it. And what's nice about it, too, is that if you're in an organization that has a culture that's an opponent to PowerPoint slides, you can really, really, it decreases the necessity for documentation or curriculum and really focuses on the task. So, for example, this is just a situation where in a particular workshop, here's what they're doing. So you have to have the scenario down, right? And you may have, of this process, you may have 7 or 8 different scenarios where these folks are sitting in the room. And this is an example of, we have customer service folks in the room along with demand management and supply and finance, right? Because typically a process will cross many different functional areas. So this is the only piece of documentation they received during class, hard copy. They did have the transaction-based or the UPerform documents to look at during class and bring them up via context-sensitive help. But all of the data is in this document. It is about a 18-page document. So we had various roles of folks that were in the class, 1 document, all the data set up, and they did all the handoffs in the class. Very, very, very effective training. Some folks would call that simulation training, so they may go to their role-based training, and the day in the life is done a week before they go live to tie everything together and build on their existing foundation. One particular client, there were no PowerPoint slides. All they did was day in the life. Okay, and they did some initial very high level role-based, but they liked the day in the life approach because they felt people could better implement that once they were back at their desk. Okay, e-learning, you know, certainly more and more as every year goes on, there's more organizations that put more e-learning into their curriculum. It's great from a repeatability perspective. certainly demand, 24/7. We've done overviews with e-learning, but we've also done very, very detailed, task-oriented, critical role e-learning. Make it engaging. We call it edutainment, and it's repeatable. There's a lot of good things as it relates to e-learning. I don't think e-learning is the panacea. I think that when you go with a blended approach, it certainly plays a part in that. And again, depending on the culture of your organization. I've been with organizations where they've done 30, 40% e-learning. I've also done implemented training with organizations where it's been 5%. So it really depends on the culture of your organization. But from a sustainability, repeatability perspective, you really can't beat it. So the other thing is the tools are getting easier. If you use a UPerform, a Captivate, a Camtasia, Articulate, Lectora, lots of these different products are becoming much, much easier to use, and the cost is driven down as well. Here's an example of how to kind of help engage your learners. There's some avatars. There's software that have avatars, and the avatars, what I'm finding is hold on one second. Let me just.
Welcome to at the end of this course, you should be able to describe the evolution of the ERP system, the high-level business process typically used in SAP, the products offered by SAP, the key SAP ECC product benefits and features, ECC terminology, and the benefits and features of Solution Manager. Hello, my name is Stephen, and I will be your instructor throughout this course. So, let's get started. SAP is Enterprise Resource Planning, or ERP, software used in most all industries to integrate information from various functions into one. Take a brief look to see what SAP can do.
Okay, so that's an example of an avatar, and what we found in talking to customers is they begin to really identify with that person. So that is something that's incredibly important, and it draws the user in, it engages them, and this avatar can certainly take on a personality their own, depending again what the culture is of the organization. There can be some jokes, some rhetorical type of questions the avatar asks, and certainly a personality that comes through, and then the users actually start to identify with it. So you've got, and you don't need programming knowledge and that sort of thing, and the hand-eye and the movements, they're becoming much more sophisticated as well. So that's just an example of another tool that's used in an e-learning environment to go ahead and engage learners. You can't really just use one tool. You want to use, if you use Lectora with some simulations, like using Captivate with Flash, with some maybe videos, either real human videos or cartoon videos or these avatars. Multitude of technologies have to be used in order to mix it up and really engage your learner. Okay, now what I've seen out there is when you look at learning management systems and really deploying this training, again, in a sustainment model and even in an initial go-live for any type of large training initiative, an LMS has to be used just to make sure that you can automate the administration of and the training plans. Who needs to take what? What are the prerequisites? Who actually how does the assessment get scored, or the user tests or quizzes, and how is that compiled? What type of reports do you get? Who did, who didn't show up for classes, as well as delivering some of the learning, like the e-learning and those type of classes. So when you look at this, you want to look at, there's several different learning management systems. A lot of the Fortune 500 companies do deploy a learning management system. Some of them have their ERP requirements on there, and some do not. Some use their learning management system strictly for their compliance training, because they will be getting other type of training initiatives in their LMS to help deploy that. And when you look at buying an LMS or renting it as an example, there's really three options. You can directly purchase it. That's purchasing the software and implementing and managing the implementation and the maintenance all in-house. You can also purchase the software, do a third-party maintenance model where you buy the software and you might have a third party that manages it and performs all the upgrades, etc. Or what's becoming popular, and again, it really depends on the size of your organization. If you don't want that initial heavy cost, you can do the SaaS or the software as a service model. So there's several different LMSs out there that offer a software as a service model, and some of them run, you still have to kind of, create and develop some of it according to your standards, but you might want to develop it in-house and those things in-house, but then outsource, and it's like maybe it could be $7, $10 a user per month that you can deploy all your learning. And again, it depends on the size of the organization. Moodle is an example of that, where the software, it's open source, freely available, but there is programming. And the nice thing about a Moodle is that I see a lot more organizations gravitating towards it, and what it does is it creates a real collaborative environment, message boards, forums, and Q&As, and folks get used to going up on a Moodle and saying, hey, I don't know how to enter a cash in advance sales order. How do I do that? And there might be other questions similar to that in a Moodle. All right, some of the characteristics of the best learning organizations, and again, this is good stuff if you're trying to get some budgeted monies here. Your goals must be aligned with the enterprise goals. C-level involvement. Find some sponsors. Find some proponents that will help you drive this through your organization. And look at your efficiency when you look at, centralized, you look at make or buy. What are some of the things that you do? Some things you want to keep in-house, other things you might want to outsource because that's a more cost-effective type of solution. The investment. Here's what's real interesting, folks, is that when you look at it, most organizations on this list spend more, but many spend less than the norm. So if I hear the words, we're cheap, we don't have any money, I mean, I hear it 100 times. And if you look at this, you can do things right. You don't have to spend all that money. And this is according to American Society Training and Development in 2009. And then learning opportunities. We talked before about the blended learning. You always have to measure. Last couple of times we talked about SMART goals, making sure that whatever you do, the initiatives that you do, that they are measurable. Okay, in building our business case, we made these assumptions the last couple of seminars or webinars, and we looked at 1,000 core users. We looked at an average hourly rate of $40 an hour. And then we also looked at how much an average knowledge worker spends searching for help and how we can help reduce that. So these are all numbers and assumptions that are going into your business case. So the first one that we looked at, and again, this is something that you're going to bring with you to get those budgeted dollars, but how we reduce SAP help. And I'm not going to go through the math here, but we can reduce the help documentation search time by 50%, and here's how we're going to do it. And the assumptions on the previous page are all from research organizations of how much, for example, an average knowledge worker spends looking for information or looking for help in a day. We always take a very conservative posture here. I'd rather go in conservative than go in and have folks starting to question your assumptions. Okay, if you don't have e-learning yet, get an e-learning SAP navigation class, and that will help the new users. That'll help users that maybe didn't use SAP that are now in an SAP role, and then we cite the Gartner Group for the savings here. Much like the SAP Overview Navigation, another real important e-learning course, at least for starters, is a reporting class, and there's really two of them. The first class is an ECC, or the core ERP reporting. The second one would be Business Intelligence, or BI. And get some e-learning up on those so they can go ahead and do that, making sure that they understand and learn how to fish rather than giving them all the information, them talking to other folks how to learn and how to do this. The e-learning certainly very repeatable and recommended for these type of areas. Last one is to look at your training related help desk calls. And again, there's some assumptions here where we can save $34,000 and, arm yourself with the statistics from the help desk and then make some assumptions on what an average call from a time perspective is. So for example, if we've got benefit and savings here, year one, we're not looking at any benefit or savings, but year 2 and 3, we have a total savings of $474,000. And that is all, again, just in better productivity by offering more training, meaning the e-learning classes, as well as reducing search time, finding help, and reducing the help desk calls. The cost, there's some assumptions there that the year one cost is $157,000 based on fully absorbed rates and how much time it takes to create some curriculum, as well as do some research, manage the initiative, and then we assume 20% ongoing cost for years 2 and 3. So we're looking at a cost of $219,000 and a net benefit of $255,000, or 116% on the ROI. Okay, so a couple little research organizations. We looked at some metrics from IDC. We also looked at ASTD, what makes great learning organizations, what makes them great, and the different vehicles that, again, lend themselves or don't lend themselves to a sustainment type of model. And then we looked at completing the business case.
Thanks very much, Jan. At this point, we're going to take a couple of questions. And before we get to that, if you should have questions for Jan that we can't answer, please feel free to reach out to them. The contact information is on your screen, or visit the website, teksoft.com. And the first question that came in, Jan, what other LMS systems have you worked with?
We've worked with Saba on some of the large ones. GeoLearning, SAP has an what they call an LSO solution. One of the ones from a software as a service model, and those were all clients that owned them. They owned it, so they had that first direct method approach where they owned the software, they managed it in-house. We've also deployed some software as a service model, so like Outstart has a good software as a service model where if you are deploying a large initiative, you got 3,000 users, you want to get an LMS system up fairly quickly, that your Outstart seems to be a pretty good LMS system to allow you to do that without that heavy initial capital outlay.
Thank you, Jan. Another question that we have here is, what kind of software did you use to create these avatars?
Oh, that's a software called CodeBaby. It's www.codebaby.com. You pay for it. There's a couple different types of payment models, and again, you don't need programming knowledge to do that. It's kind of a front end to help create these avatars.
Thanks very much, Jan. And we are at the 30-minute mark. We do want to keep it to that point, so we're going to stop right there for today. We really want to thank all of you for coming and viewing this important presentation. Jan, of course, thank you, and thanks to Teksoft Ventures for presenting today's web seminar. And we look forward to seeing all of you at a future Teksoft Ventures webinar very soon. And with that, we hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks, folks.